Estate planning is one of those areas in retirement that, in my opinion, is probably one of the most overlooked areas, but probably one of the most important things to be considering. And as we start to move into retirement, it's really worth revisiting some of these documents that we have in place. So there's really 5 main types of estate planning documents that we'll want to go through. So starting with our powers of attorney, so there's 2 types. We have financial and we have healthcare. We have wills, ladybird deeds, and then our trusts. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into each of those. So starting with our powers of attorney, these are really where we're allowing people to make our financial and medical decisions if we're in a position where we're not able to, such as like in a coma. What's important though is as we get older, we need to be reviewing who we put in charge of these different areas. So as an example, when I set my healthcare power of attorney up a few years ago, I named my brother. You know, we've had a 34-year relationship together. I thought he's probably the best person to be able to make those decisions objectively, knowing my values, beliefs, and those sorts of things. However, since I put those in place, he's since relocated out to the East Coast. So I want to think about, is he still the best person to be making decisions around, my health care if I'm in a position where I can't when he's states away? So we want to be revisiting some of these different documents, make sure the people we have named there are still appropriate. Wills are a great thing that we have when we're younger to name guardianship for our kids. But as we get older, we want to think about, is a will still enough? A will, in my opinion, is just a ticket to probate court. It doesn't avoid that probate process. It makes the process certainly easier for our heirs, but with that, it's still contestable and it's still a public hearing. So again, if we have a will in place, it's a great starting point, but we want to be thinking about, is that still enough with our current goals and values and those sorts of things? Ladybird deeds are a document that really become a lot more popular over the years. Very useful tool when we're thinking about Medicaid spend down rules for long-term care type scenarios. So if that's something you have in place, making sure that's still up to date with current laws, or depending around concerns with long-term care, you might want to revisit and see if that's a document you should have in place. And lastly, trusts. Trusts are one of the areas that I think get a bad reputation. We often think they're only for just these high net worth or ultra high net worth families. That couldn't be further from the truth. When we look at trust, there's tons of different types of trust out there. When I think about a trust though, the key is that we often think when we pass away, our financial life ends. A trust allows our financial life to continue past our death. It allows us to have a lot of control over our assets and a lot of protection. So if we have young heirs, as an example, we're concerned that maybe they might be going through a divorce down the road or could be subject to some sort of litigation or lawsuit, a trust will allow us to protect those assets. It also allows us to name specific language around distributions. It's a lot different when you inherit money versus when you build it. There's an emotional attachment that comes with that. A trust might be important for you if you're concerned with kids inheriting a large chunk of money and going out and buying a Ferrari when they turn 18 as an example. You can set up a specific plan as far as how these assets get passed on. So those are the main types of documents we want to be looking at. But as if with anything, we want to be focusing on kind of the bigger picture plan. So we want to look at the documents, but also what can we be doing today proactively to help from an estate planning perspective. So looking at things like life insurance or long-term care. We've talked about this in past episodes. You get a lot of leverage, you get a lot of protection, can offer a lot of liquidity between how these different things are set up. Depending on what we're trying to do though, that might gauge us in a different direction on how we set up those estate planning documents. As an example, if we're concerned with potentially estate tax laws changing down the road and we want to remove money from our estate, we might set up something called an ILIT, an Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust. So if we're going down that road, those two things are working together and we want to make sure they're set up in conjunction with each other. Looking at things like Roth conversions, great estate planning tactic to help reduce the tax burden to heirs. Also thinking about gifting versus maybe doing QCDs to help minimize that tax burden, again, not only to us, but also to our heirs down the road. Also thinking about like Social Security and pension elections. These are irrevocable decisions. Depending on how we set these up, have a direct impact to our heirs. And that can, of course, then build into life insurance, long-term care, all of these other things. So when you're starting to do these planning techniques, as you pull on one string, it certainly affects something on the other side. So we want to start with the plan, and then as we're working through these different areas, we'll start to build into some of these other estate planning documents. But as a whole, as you get prepared for retirement and move into retirement, we want to be working on a plan. And then from that plan, we want to start to visit these different estate planning documents and make sure everything is set up in place and working in one cohesive plan together.